The announcement echoed through the steel and glass dome of the station. A voice swallowed by the hum of footsteps, rolling suitcases, and the restless murmur of strangers. People rushed past in streams, chasing departures, chasing reunions, chasing something she could not yet name. She stood still. Her fingers gripped the edge of a worn red scarf wound around her wrist, the fabric trembling with the faint shake of her hand. The scarf wasn't for warmth, it was summer, and the air smelled of metal, sweat, and travel. It was memory, knotted against her skin like a vow no one else could see. A gust slipped through the high windows and lifted a strand of her hair across her cheek. She did not brush it away. Her eyes, dark, searching, kept pulling back toward the departure gate, where bodies blurred into shadows and light. Each face that passed made her chest rise, then sink, searching, waiting, not sure if for him or for something else entirely. A suitcase rested at her feet, small, black, its edges scraped by journeys already endured. She hadn't meant to bring it. It had been left packed for months, untouched in the corner of her room like a silent threat. Now it was here, as though it had decided for her. Somewhere, a child laughed. Somewhere, a woman cried into her phone. The sounds bled together until all she heard was her own heartbeat, heavy and uneven. Her palm tightened around the scarf. The faint fray along its edge caught her nail. The smallest detail, but it made her throat ache. She remembered the day. It was given words, whispered in warmth, promises that tasted eternal. She almost smiled, almost. Boarding now. Gate 7. The intercom broke her trance. Her feet did not move. She only shifted slightly, enough to see her reflection in the wide glass wall. A girl standing alone in a storm of motion, hair falling wild, lips pressed thin, eyes refusing to drown. She steadied herself, as if seeing a stranger she might one day learn to know. A man brushed past, bumping her shoulder. She flinched, not from pain, but from the sudden awareness that she was trembling harder now. She whispered under her breath, soft as a secret meant only for the scarf. Sometimes love does not wait. Sometimes it ends before it begins. The train roared in the distance. People surged toward the gate. She did not follow. Her hand lingered at her side, knuckles white around the scarf, suitcase untouched. Somewhere inside her, a decision pressed against her ribs like glass threatening to shatter, and still, she waited. The train had come and gone, but she was still there. Her suitcase still at her feet. The scarf slipped loose, trailing along her wrist as if it, too, was tired of waiting. She wrapped it tighter, the motion quick and almost angry, as though binding herself to something she could not release. A child's laughter floated from a bench nearby. A little girl ran into her father's arms, her tiny backpack bouncing with each step. He lifted her easily, spinning once, their joy painting the air brighter than the sterile lights of the station. The sight caught in her chest. She lowered her gaze. Her suitcase leaned forward slightly, as though nudging her memory open. She had carried one just like it when she was 12, the day her father had taken her on his last business trip. He had knelt beside her on the platform, smoothing her hair, placing a hand over hers on the handle of that cheap plastic bag. "Don't ever let anyone tell you where your road ends," he had whispered. "You walk it until you decide." But he had not come back. The suitcase was all she had kept. Now, as she stared at the worn corners of this newer one, she wondered if she was any different than the girl left waiting on a platform years ago. Her throat tightened. She adjusted the scarf once more, pulling it to her lips. That gift once red like fire had dulled to a deeper, blood-heavy shade. It smelled faintly of dust now, but beneath it, she swore she still felt the warmth of a voice, of a promise that had broken too soon. Around her, people reunited in embraces that seemed to last forever, as though their arms could keep time from moving. She stood apart, invisible in her silence, her heart thudding like a secret nobody wanted to hear. That was when she felt its eyes across the waiting area. A man stood with his back against a pillar, not rushing like the others. He wasn't reading, wasn't scrolling through his phone, wasn't pretending distraction. He was simply watching her. His stillness unnerved her more than the crowd's chaos. His hands were folded loosely, his face unreadable, but his gaze carried weight, deliberate, steady, like he was waiting for something she hadn't yet chosen. Her fingers twitched around the handle of her suitcase. She looked away, forcing herself to breathe evenly. But her pulse betrayed her. The overhead speakers crackled again. Another departure, another chance. Her feet shifted forward, one small step, then another until she paused. She turned her head slightly, as though caught between choices, as though hearing her father's voice again. For the first time in hours, her lips curved. Not a smile, not exactly. Something softer, something uncertain. The scarf slipped again, and she did not fix it, and still the man watched. The air shifted, heavy, damp, as if the sky above the station ceiling were preparing to break. The crowd had thinned, but she stayed, tethered by something she could not yet name. The man had not moved either. He leaned casually against the pillar, though there was nothing casual in the way his eyes held her. For a fleeting moment, she thought she should walk away, vanish into the blur of strangers, yet her legs would not obey. When he finally pushed off from the pillar, his steps were unhurried. He did not approach her directly, just enough for her to notice the scuffed leather of his shoes, their soles worn thin. Shoes that had walked too far, perhaps too long, for someone who stood with such quiet composure. She pretended to adjust her suitcase, but her eyes betrayed her curiosity, tracing the faint crack along his wristwatch. Its glass was splintered, frozen at a single hour. 6:17. She wondered whose time had stopped there, his or someone else's. He sat on a bench nearby, not beside her, but near enough that his silence pressed against hers. He reached into his jacket pocket with a careful hand and, for the briefest instant, she glimpsed a folded photograph, edges curling with age. He did not open it, just held it, thumb grazing the crease, before tucking it away again. Her breath caught. She knew that gesture, that delicate act of keeping pain close, as though it was both poison and medicine. She thought of her own way her fingers had clutched it moments ago, and for the first time, she felt a mirror standing before her, invisible but undeniable. A low rumble rolled across the ceiling. Thunder, muted but near. The flickering of the overhead lights drew shadows across the floor, stretching their shapes until they almost touched. Her chest tightened. She should leave. She had places to go, roads to walk, debts emotional and otherwise that demanded her strength, yet the air between them felt like a held breath, waiting. She turned slightly, enough for her eyes to meet his. They did not speak, not yet. But in his gaze, she saw what she feared most, recognition, not of her face, perhaps, but of her wounds. Rain began to tap against the high windows, each drop a delicate knock that sounded almost like pleading. Her suitcase handle grew slick in her hand. She could rise, walk away, disappear before the rain fell harder. Yet her body betrayed her again, feet anchored to the ground. Was this fate? She wondered, or something far more dangerous on unseen hand, pulling her into a story she had not chosen. His watch ticked once, though it was broken. Or perhaps she only imagined it. The scarf slipped lower on her wrist, and still the rain had found its rhythm outside, hammering against the glass dome in uneven beats. People hurried past with umbrellas dripping, shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Life moved on. Indifferent. She rose from the bench. The motion was sudden, desperate. Though her body had remembered something, her mind refused to admit. Her hand gripped the suitcase handle until her knuckles blanched. This was her chance to leave, to vanish into the noise of departure boards and ticket stubs. Her steps quickened, heels striking the tiles with uneven force. She could feel her chest breaking open with every stride, the scarf trailing loose at her side, dragging across the ground like an unwilling witness. And then she stopped. She stopped because she felt him before she saw him, his shadow stretched across the floor, reaching hers. Her breath caught. She turned, just slightly, enough to catch the way his gaze lingered not on her, but on the red scarf slipping from her wrist. For the first time, his eyes softened. He stooped, deliberate, unhurried, and lifted the scarf before it could touch the wet ground. Their fingers brushed when he held it out. Some people carry more than just bags. His voice was low, almost drowned by the storm outside. They carry silence. The scarf between them trembled, as though it understood. She stared at it, then at him. For a moment, she wanted to take it back. For a moment, she wanted to let it stay in his hands. A woman passing by muttered something under her breath, shaking her head, her eyes flicking with disdain, as though love, whatever this fragile thing was a weakness to be scorned. A man dragging a child glanced at them, frowned, then pulled his daughter closer. Society had judged them in passing, without words, without knowing. Her lips parted, but no sound came. His wristwatch glinted under the harsh station light, cracked face reflecting her own hesitation. His shoes, soaked at the edges, whispered of roads walked too long, alone. The photograph, she remembered it, now was still tucked against his chest. Her throat ached. She wanted to scream, to collapse, to run. Instead, she stood still, trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. The scarf remained between them, suspended like a bridge or a noose. She whispered finally, barely audible. A confession or a curse, she wasn't sure which. Not all love stories end in forever. The thunder outside roared, drowning her voice. He looked at her, searching, but did not move closer. The scarf slipped again, this time resting entirely in his hand. She did not take it back, and the silence between them grew heavier than the storm. She did not move. The scarf rested in his hand, heavy as if it carried more than fabric. She reached for it, but he didn't let go, not immediately. His gaze held hers with an intensity that made her chest burn. Then, without a word, he tucked it carefully over his arm, like something fragile that deserved reverence. "You don't know what you're holding," she whispered. "Don't I?" His tone was soft, but it struck like thunder. Her pulse stumbled. She turned, walking away half in anger, half in fear. The suitcase rattled behind her wheels, announcing her retreat. But when she reached the corner of the waiting hall, her steps faltered. A glowing screen by the cafe door caught her eye. Corporate Acquisition, Meyer Industries expands. The headline carried his name, a face she had seen only in brochures, online job listings, and dreams of escape now stood only feet away. Her breath froze. Meyer. He wasn't just a stranger with worn shoes. He was the owner of the company. She had sent her last desperate application to last week, her only hope after months of rejection. She turned back, slowly, as though walking into a trap she already knew would close. He had not moved, only watched her, the scarf still in his hand. Her father's words came back clear, cutting through the storm inside her. "Don't ever let anyone tell you where your road ends. You walk it until you decide." But what if the road she had chosen led directly into him? She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Why do you have this scarf?" For a moment, silence. Then he lowered his head, thumb brushing the fabric's edge. "It belonged to someone I lost," he said. "My daughter." The words sliced through her. Daughter. A truth that shifted the ground beneath her feet. The scarf, the one that had been her vow, her burden, was not only hers, it was a thread that tied her to him, through grief neither of them had chosen. The storm outside cracked open, lightning painting the station windows in white fire. She staggered back, trembling. Every path she had imagined, revenge, survival, escape, blurred into one unbearable choice. Her eyes burned. She could not leave. Not now, not when everything she carried had tangled with everything he had lost. Her lips shaped the line she had whispered before, now returned with a sharper edge. "Sometimes love does not wait. Sometimes it ends before it begins." He looked at her as though hearing it for the first time. The scarf slipped fully into her hands this time. She clutched it to her chest, and then, without warning, she turned and walked through the door, leading to his world, his company, his secrets, his past. A door that once crossed would never let her go back. The boardroom was colder than the station had been. Glass walls framed the city, rain trailing in jagged rivers down their surface. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her chest. She sat at the long, polished table, her small suitcase resting at her feet. The red scarf lay folded neatly before her, no longer trembling on her wrist, no longer bound to her hand. It seemed to wait like judgment. He entered quietly, no trace of the station's stillness in his stride now. Here, in this place of power, he belonged. She realized with a sharp pang that she was an intruder in his world, standing on a threshold she had no right to cross. "Why me?" she asked, before he could speak. Her voice cracked, too raw to sound strong. "Why follow me? Why give this back?" He studied her, expression unreadable. Then, he walked to the table, resting his palm over the scarf. "You remind me of her," he said at last. "Not because of your face, not your voice. It's the way you hold on to something already gone." Her stomach twisted. She wanted to scream at him, to tear the scarf from under his hand, to reject the weight he placed on her shoulders. Yet a part of her understood, too well. His eyes softened not with love, but with recognition. The same recognition her father once gave her, same recognition she had been waiting for, even in her revenge. "You don't want me," she whispered. "You want her shadow." He didn't deny it. His silence was the truest confession. She stood, the chair scraping against the marble floor. Every nerve screamed for her to leave, to vanish, to never look back. But instead, she reached for the scarf. Her hand hovered, then slowly, she pushed it toward him. I carried it long enough, she said, voice shaking but steady. It was never mine to keep. The gesture felt like tearing out a piece of herself. Yet in that sacrifice, something lifted a chain she hadn't realized she had bound herself in. He picked it up with reverence, folding it once more, but his face remained carved in stone. Whatever bond they shared would never soften into love. Not in this lifetime. The thunder broke again, rolling through the sky. She walked to the glass wall, gazing down at the rushing streets below. The city pulsed with strangers, each carrying their own silence, their own scars. She thought of the station, the hum of departures, the child's laughter, her reflection in the glass. She had been a girl waiting. Now she was the one walking away. Her suitcase handle was cold in her grip, but she held it firm. She did not look back when she stepped out of the room. Some stories ended quietly, without the fireworks of triumph or the comfort of closure. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor, each one an ending and a beginning. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. The city was quieter at dawn. The storm had passed, leaving the streets slick with memory. Her shoes tapped softly against the pavement as she walked, suitcase rolling beside her, its sound no longer rattling, but steady. She paused at a corner cafe, not to go inside but to watch the morning unfurl, commuters clutching paper cups, children rubbing sleep from their eyes, a world that had not noticed her story at all. In her hand, there was no scarf. She had left it behind, not in anger, not in defeat, but because it no longer belonged with her. She thought of it resting in his office now, folded neatly beneath sterile light. Perhaps he would keep it close. Perhaps he would bury it in silence. Either way, it was no longer her burden to carry. Her father's voice lingered as though it had walked beside her through the night. Don't ever let anyone tell you where your road ends. You walk it until you decide. She breathed deeply, chest rising without the weight of the fabric wound tight. For the first time in years, her hands felt free, not bound to the tremble of memory. On her way home, she passed the station once more. Through the glass walls, she saw the endless departures, the endless arrivals, families colliding in embraces, lovers clinging as though their arms could command eternity. She stood outside the glass this time, watching but not waiting. Her reflection met her gaze faintly in the window, hair damp from morning air, eyes tired but alive. She looked less like the girl searching for someone, more like the woman learning to stand alone. She whispered to herself, a truth she hadn't been ready to hear until now. Sometimes love is not romance's recognition. Recognition of pain. Recognition of survival. Recognition that some endings are beginnings disguised in silence. When she finally returned to her apartment, she placed the suitcase in its corner. She did not leave it packed this time. She unzipped it, folded her clothes into drawers, let the sound of zippers closing feel like an ending. The morning light cut across the room, catching on the glass of her window, spilling into the small drawer by her bed, where she had once kept the scarf. It sat empty now. Empty, but not hollow. She rested her hand on the wood, a gesture like goodbye. Then she pulled the curtains open wider, letting more light in than before. Some stories, she thought, are not about forever. Some are about what you find when forever doesn't arrive. And the silence that followed was not empty, it was hers. Because the hardest truth is this: closure is never given, it is chosen.